Hi, my name is Daniel, and this week we'll be talking about D&D's influence in video games. So,
It was a longer pause than intended. We didn't know who was going to talk.
Yeah.
staring at each other.
Mm-hmm.
So this week we're talking about the influence of D&D on video games.
And D&D, if you don't know, is Dungeons and Dragons.
Person listening to a video game podcast
Yeah.
who doesn't know what D&D is.
I was trying to think of, never mind. I was saying, dishes and dinner or something.
Would have been really good if you got it right. It's such a shame.
So, D&D has a long-standing history.
Super long.
Yeah, and being a very much a nerd hobby sort of thing has influenced one of the other nerd hobby things, video games.
Mm-hmm. It was first introduced in the TV series Stranger Things.
D&D, the first series, I guess, of D&D books, the first three, were published in 1974, which was a long time ago
Yeah.
to us millennials, but about 42 years ago. This is something Dan and I were talking about earlier, but D&D's come a super, super long way. First edition D&D,
It's not great.
Yeah, the very, very first edition, which is what is now, I guess, called basic D&D. The
not even
1974 version.
A D&D.
Yeah, AD&D, which is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, is typically considered the real first edition, and that was released in 1977, just 3 years afterward. Basic Dungeons and Dragons, just, I guess, vanilla D&D, in the player's handbook, it didn't tell you how you were supposed to roll attributes, just that you were supposed to roll them. And attributes, are essentially the points that you use to determine how skilled you are in certain areas.
That's your strength and intelligence and stuff.
Yeah,
Your
strength.
basic human characteristics.
Yeah, strength, intelligence.
Which they copied from Fallout's special system.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Let's see, wisdom, dexterity, constitution,
Charisma.
and charisma. Yeah, charisma. Fun fact: if you were playing as a female character in the original games or in the first edition, if you were a female, charisma was replaced by beauty.
Oh. That's weird because charisma is not an inherently masculine trait.
Exactly. Yeah.
It seems really arbitrary.
Charisma is just essentially you being a smooth talker. So it was dudes can talk, but women, you just look at women.
Yeah, you don't have a speaking skill. You just have a stand there. Just
Yeah. And there are also spells that spells and some abilities, or I guess what we would now call abilities, that were heavily influenced by the beauty trait. And a lot of roles for female characters specifically use the beauty trait to get past. So instead of doing an intimidation,
you have to afflict them with horny.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you have to seduce them.
That's obviously stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm not justifying it by any means, but that was kind of the culture of what we expected fantasy fiction to be at the time.
The really, really interesting thing, what I think is super interesting anyway, is that some of that does come along with sort of.
Keep going.
Okay, I'm trying to think. It comes along with, you notice changes when D&D moves from TSR to being bought by Wizards of the Coast. Because Wizards are the people who introduced D&D 3 and then 3.5 3 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So TSR was the publishing company that Gary Gygax and another one of his friends, who I forget, I don't think it was Arneson, but it was the publishing house that he had, and it was failing pretty terribly in 1999 or 97. But they were bought by Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast merged Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and Basic into one system, which then became 3. And then that was released in 2000. And then D&D 3.5 was released 3 years later in 2003. But you notice a lot of the changes. They pretty much get rid of arbitrary caps on like gender and that sort of stuff, and like the pronouns too change a lot in class descriptions as soon as it moves from strictly being owned by Gygax to being bought by Wizards of the Coast. And part of that is because Gygax called himself, or he's a self-described biological
Determinist?
Yeah, determinist, where he believes that there's like just, you know, these hard-coded differences between male and female brains. And that was a lot of his reasoning behind why women characters didn't have the strength modifier as high as men.
I wonder if anyone ever told Gygax that Dungeons and Dragons is fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the role that Wizards of the Coast, now that they're in charge of it, has kind of taken in that direction too.
Yeah.
Because in comparison to first edition, where it has, you know, like what we were talking about with the beauty instead of charisma, there was also the most infamous example from the Dungeon Master's Guide is the random harlot encounter table, where you roll a D100 and the numbers will correspond to a harlot that you can like just randomly come across and like have sex with.
Like in the woods or like in dungeons
like,
and shit.
There's I don't remember off the top of my head, but like it's just whenever the DM wants, pretty much.
You're rolling generally like there's like random monster encounters where like I'm in a desert, so I roll on like the desert table, and then some like desert appropriate monster will show up.
Yeah, so like you're in the city, and
so you're in a harlot area, and you roll
that's the harlot themes.
Yeah, like you're in the city, you know, in the red light district, so you roll to get boned. Yeah, so it had the random harlot encounter table, and then also it had arbitrary caps on
strength and stuff based on gender.
Strength and stuff based on gender, but also like based on class as well. Like a female fighter could only get to I think level 10, whereas male fighters could get up to about 14, I believe, 14 or 15. But also, I believe elven clerics can get up to level 14. But dwarven fighters, or it might be dwarven clerics, get up to like level 4. Can only go to level 4 or something. And I don't know if it's dwarven clerics specifically, but there is a class that if your race is dwarf, you can only get up to level 4. You just don't get to go any higher. So you see a lot of those restrictions removed in 2000 with third edition.
Yeah,
there's when it moves houses.
Mm-hmm. There's no strength restrictions or like wisdom or intelligence restrictions based on gender, and there's like no like caps based on like what race you're playing
or gender.
Or gender. There's still like alignment restrictions, like a paladin has to be lawful good, but like as opposed to earlier editions where you had to have like you had to meet certain stat thresholds to like qualify to be a paladin. All of that's gone once you reach third edition. Like it's still useful to have all those stats, but you don't need them.
It also that lends a lot to the role playing aspect of the game. With what they introduced with third edition, is getting rid of all those like thresholds that you had to meet, because you might just really want to play a paladin, but the attributes that you rolled, if you're doing it the random way, just might not fit really well. But that's a really good character opportunity to role play. Like, your person just wants to be a paladin, and they're not very good. They're not super strong. They don't have a really high wisdom or whatever, or intelligence. I forget exactly what Paladin needs.
Paladins are a charisma-based caster, if I remember right, and then you also need strength because you're like functionally a fighter with cleric spells.
Yeah. But yeah, like your person really wants to be a paladin, but they're not equipped for it. Like with their stats, it lends to like the character's harder to play, obviously, when it comes to like fighting. But that also leads to a lot more role playing opportunities, and that's that's something that them moving to the D20 system also brought in as well. Because third edition introduced D20, which just made
they were always on D20s.
No, possibly. Well, the thing was that third edition.
Just the D20 system that they used.
Yeah, the D20 system.
Because second edition uses THAC0.
Yeah.
Like hitting an armor class and stuff.
Yeah, THAC0 is 2-hit armor class 0.
Yeah.
I don't know what any of that meant.
So, the way that second and first edition worked is, do you know what armor class is?
Mm-hmm.
And armor class, I guess, for other people.
It's the threshold that you have to roll your, like, basically accuracy hit to get through.
Yeah. So if in third edition forward up to fifth, which is where we are now, if you have an armor class of 16, that's good. Because the person has to roll a 16 or higher to hit you.
Mm-hmm.
But in THAC0, which was first and second, if you had a 16 in armor class, that was bad because you wanted it to be as close to 0 as possible, and you could go -2 in your armor class.
What? Which is really so the actual rule for THAC0, so with third edition and forward, so like Reba was saying, if you have like an armor class of like 16, you roll a d20, and if you roll like a 17, then like you hit the person. Or if you roll like a 14 and then you like add some stuff based on like I'm really strong and I'm like a really good fighter, so I'll like add like 3 to it, so it's like ends up being like 17, so I hit them. Like as long as the number is bigger than their armor class or equal to it, you succeed. Whereas with THAC0, it is to calculate it, if it succeeds, you would take the AC of the target and subtract it from the attacker's THAC0, then roll a 20-sided die. If the die rolls equal to or higher than the calculated number, the attack hits. So it's the same idea, but just like in the opposite direction for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of just like needlessly complex in comparison.
Yes.
Yeah. Like the system works the same way, but it's way, way easier to understand without THAC0.
Like they're with THAC0, armor and like sometimes weapons too are things you subtract. So like your person could end up with an armor class of like -3 or whatever, because they have certain items equipped, which is horrible because that just doesn't make any sense. Whereas in third and forward, it's if you have like armor equipped, it adds positively to your armor class. And there are things that will take away from AC, but it's get this number or higher and you're good. The attack hits, and then you roll for damage after that. Yeah, it's a lot of like really interesting, innovative ideas were introduced in 1 and 2, but they were just not super well polished. And part of that too comes from the fact that like the guys who made D&D, Gygax and Arneson are the big two. But then there's also, I think, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, but it's Lafkos. He did a lot of play testing for them, but they were all friends. They'd all played together. And when you have that sort of, when you homebrew in that way, there's always
everything makes sense.
Yeah, there's always like implied rules that you forget that you kind of have that.
Especially when you're like basically inventing an entire genre of game.
Yeah,
it's really easy to overlook those details.
And they didn't realize it at the time that they were doing that. But yeah, it's once you get that game out with other people, and then maybe somebody comes across a situation that you and your friends have never like even thought about doing, and then that's when the rules start to get really shaky. And in I don't remember if third edition D&D or 3.5, which is the really, really big and popular one, addresses it, but in 5th edition, the player's guide just straight up says like that specific rules overrule generic ones or like really vague rules.
Mm-hmm.
So it counts for like contradictions that will sometimes happen with like classes and casting.
Yeah. Like from like I think from because 3rd edition has that a little bit too. And like from there forward, like pretty much the rule is like if this new thing says like you can attack multiple times per round, and like previously it said you couldn't, then now you can.
Yeah. But then it was also like they've made it a lot clearer where it's like these are just basic rules for you to use. Like D&D has a ton of rules. Like you're gonna run across like people who run campaigns where you have to eat food or you'll starve and you have to rest or you can't fight properly, which are rules that most people ignore. But because D&D has so much structure to it, you can take out what you want or add what you want.
It's very modular.
It's super modular. It's not under an open game license anymore, but 3.5 is, which is why Pathfinder is so big. Because now it's under a different license where you have to follow like very, very specific guidelines, which is why there isn't a ton of stuff that isn't from Wizards of the Coast for 5th edition. And then 4th edition, which we haven't talked about, but that's because 4th sucks.
Yeah, 4th edition went back to a lot of the sort of like more gamey tropes of like 1st and 2nd edition. But I think like in a much more like video game way than as opposed to like the sort of board game way of like 1st and 2nd edition. 4th edition gives you like powers that you can use like every encounter. So like you can like do something like 3 times every encounter, and you can do like this thing like once per day, and you have like all these like cards. It's very like restrictive based on like you always need to have certain things to be able to do certain things. There's a lot less freedom in like what you're able to do. Like most people in most turns in Dungeons and Dragons will just say like I attack or I cast spell, but like there's always just like I'm gonna try some weird goofy thing. But like 4th edition clamps down on that a lot, like requiring you more so to have like specific things that do specific things.
Is that when you get into like in order to cast this spell you need like a bat wing and a bunch of other junk?
Well, that's more like 1st and 2nd edition, which is especially 1st edition, which is I still think this is really funny. In 1st edition, the sort of in joke was that like wizards aren't actually magic; you're just MacGyvering your way through everything. So like to like cast a fireball, you require all these like random ingredients, but it's random ingredients that when put together like explode into a fireball.
So the wizard's just tinkering with stuff and they don't have any magic powers.
Because like because wizards are just like really smart. Wizards don't have innate magic. They like learn it, and so like you get your daily spells by like studying your book and like preparing your spells for the day by like gathering up all your materials and stuff. As opposed to like a sorcerer or somebody who's like you have like arcane blood and you can just like randomly like, oh, I want to cast a fireball.
That's funny. I like those two like kind of coexisting though.
Yeah,
because the wizard reminds me more of like an alchemist, or like in Final Fantasy would be like a chemist or something like that.
Yeah, that's when you like kind of play it straight. Most people won't mess with the like ingredient requirements because 5th edition I believe still does have like some spells have ingredient requirements that you can just ignore because everything's fake.
It's
they're there for people who like to use them, but most people don't. Because honestly, if I was ever part of a campaign where the DM like I had to have all the ingredients to cast a spell, I just fucking quit. Like that's just not what I want to do.
That actually does sound like sort of enticing to me though, but it's also like good God keeping up with all that.
Yeah, it's resource management that is just really poorly handled, especially because character sheets are not super solid. You don't have enough room to keep track of that. You have to keep a separate journal. Yeah,
and keeping a running list of something on your character sheet is pretty much impossible.
Yep.
It works with some stuff in like the later editions because in 3rd edition forward, you have like a spell pouch and that's assumed to be because like especially if you're a wizard, like every spell has like spell requirements that are like basic little cheap things, and so you keep your spell patch on you, and your spell patch has like all your basic needs for casting spells. But then there's like the really, really big spells like Wish or like Resurrect or something usually have some sort of like material component, because like being able to just like on a whim, like unprepared, just like bring someone back from the dead or like alter reality is like sort of overpowered. So they limit it by like you're able to cast this because you're like a very powerful wizard and you like understand how to cast it. But the limiting factor is like it's expensive.
That makes sense. So, 20 minutes in, we should probably start moving on to what this has to do with video games.
Yeah.
So I want to actually start at the ending, because what's significant, or what I think the most significant thing about Dungeons and Dragons is the malleable nature of how the game is played. So it's not just like I hit the thing till it dies. You can do that, but there's also a lot of like you said, MacGyvering your way through things, or like doing goofy stuff, and that's part of the nature of it. Is you're not restricted to what the code of the game is telling you what you can do. You can make up your own scenarios and your own solutions. So that's the thing that never really translated into video games very well. But I think, and this is a really weird direction to take this, I think, but I think Zelda Breath of the Wild is the closest we've come to it. It's one of the only games I've ever seen where you can solve like one puzzle like 50 different ways. There's a clear intended path that you're supposed to take, but there are all kinds of different methods you can use to get to it.
Yeah, there was one puzzle I solved in Breath of the Wild by you had to like navigate a ball through a maze to get to the very end.
Oh, yeah.
And I just flipped my gamepad over and used the black, like the backside of it, which didn't have anything on it, to just pop the ball over into the goal. Instead of going through the maze and then jumping it. Just take it when it came out. Boom.
It's a lot of deconstructing like what you're supposed to do and like finding your own solution, which I think is really cool, because my issue with puzzle games in general is that if you're not thinking the exact same way that the developer was, the puzzle solution might not be the best solution or might not make sense. Yeah. And you'll be restricted by the virtue of the fact that this game is pre-coded and nothing else can change.
There's some games that like, because some games that works really well for, like, I don't think Portal would be as good if there were like a billion solutions to everything.
Well, yeah.
But like a lot of there are like other puzzle games that have like multiple solutions, where like a lot of like physics-based puzzlers especially will allow you to sort of just like finagle your way into it, however you want to do it. Like the developers have always some like intended way, like the way that they found that's like the most efficient that they've found. But there's like all sorts of other ways to do it.
But that's more of a problem in like old Sierra-style adventure games, I think.
Yeah.
Where like, I guess it kind of seems obvious to take the goldfish out of the bowl and then use the bowl for something.
Yeah, point-and-click game logic, or old adventure game logic is not usually the best.
Yeah, which typically doesn't translate into anything even remotely reminiscing about logic.
Yeah.
So that is something that's also like been kind of contrived and doesn't really exist anymore. Like those style of adventure games are pretty much gone. We have
there are still point-and-click adventure games.
Not very many.
No, I mean there's significantly less, but people still like that formula. And so there are still games coming out like that. Like Thimbleweed Park came out like 2 days ago.
Yeah, and we've also had the remake or the remaster of Day of the Tentacle and Grim Fandango recently.
I know that Neil Cicierega is working on a point-and-click adventure game right now.
Yeah,
called Icon Architect.
Yeah, that looks super fun. Mm-hmm. And Broken Sword's getting a sequel like right now.
Yeah, and there was also the new King's Quest like a year or two ago, something like that.
Yeah. So
it's not a dead genre. It's something that I feel like a lot of developers are trying to revive, because it was like functionally dead for like 9 years.
Yeah.
Basically, like Psychonauts was the last one I can think of that was similar to that. Psychonauts is as much a platformer as it is like an adventure game, and that not point and click obviously.
Yeah.
But that's the way you solve a lot of puzzles.
Oh, is just gathering the MacGuffins.
Yeah. And a lot of the logic is like that too. Like there were a bunch of puzzles that just like didn't make a lick of sense to me that I had to look up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's D&D is really great, especially like when you have a great DM for it who will let you kind of do like crazy shit. Mm-hmm. Like all of the best like D&D stories are of characters like breaking things in unintentional ways. Like the one time where shoot, was it Luke who got the nat 20 and like
punched a knife and it blew up?
It was I was running Call of Cthulhu, which is a infamously hard pen and paper role playing game, and he was fighting some like sort of like fire elemental sort of thing, and it was a D percentile system, so there's like a 1% chance for like a critical success or a critical failure, and it crit fails, and then he like crit succeeds, and it does like some ludicrous amount of damage. It like instantly kills it. And it wasn't an intended thing. It wasn't like a thing that was like, that I'd like thought out beforehand. It was just sort of like the fun nature of like rolling with dice for a pen and paper RPG is that you never know exactly how things are going to turn out. So there's no like writing ahead for like the exact sequence of like a fight, because like the dice roll the way they roll.
Yeah.
And everyone sort of has to deal with that. Like you, as a DM, you can lie. And fudge numbers, so you don't kill everybody.
And that's what makes it more interesting than video games, I think, too. Because, like, with video games, like, in both scenarios, you do have to deal with balance. But in video games, if a boss is unbalanced or unfair, if you die, sucks. And there's no magical hand that's going to adjust that to be more fair.
Yeah.
But that's also another thing that like people get really, really attached to the characters that they play in D&D because you spend so much time like making the characters and then on adventures with them that like permadeath is kind of like a really big rule that a lot of people do follow in D&D, where if you're the rules are a little different, but how it works in 5th edition is that if you go to 0 HP, you get knocked out, you're unconscious, and then you do every turn you roll a d20, and if it's 10 or above, I believe it's a save. So you have, and then if it's 10 or below, or if it's below 10, then you
start to like bleed out. You have to go into negative hit points.
No, you don't go into negative. It's essentially
it's three checkboxes. Either you succeed 3 times or you fail 3 times,
and whichever one happens first. It doesn't have to be consecutively. You can get 2 fails, a save, and then a fail, and then your character's dead. But then it also does the hit points where, like, if the creature still keeps attacking you while you're unconscious and you get to, I think it's negative half of whatever your max health is, then
you get 2 automatic failures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you die.
So that's something I've only really seen translate into a few games. Final Fantasy 15 is one of them, where when you lose all your health, you don't die immediately, but you go into like sort of a negative health scenario where the enemy has to wipe your health out again while you're incapacitated and can't fight back, and then you use a potion to get back to normal, or if you die, you use a Phoenix Down and you revive.
Yeah, because there's in D&D there's still like magical resurrection. Like a high level cleric can like bring like a pile of ash back to life, but like other pen and paper role playing games, especially any non-magical one, if you're dead, you're just dead. Like in the Call of Cthulhu campaign, any player that died would just be dead. There's no way to bring anybody back. I mean, there's resurrection, but you just like come back as like a zombie.
Yeah. So players will have to then like create a new character basically from scratch.
Yeah.
And there's like strictly nothing stopping them from just like remaking their first same character, but that takes a little bit of the fun out of it.
Yeah. So it's like because it gives it some narrative stake. Because like they die, and like it's a tragic and unexpected thing that like the villain shot a fireball through the cleric's face and now he's dead.
Yeah, and it because you actually like role play as the character, like what comes out of your mouth is what comes out of theirs. It adds that like super high level of intimacy between like you and the character, where like I've heard stories of people like being absolutely devastated when they've lost a character.
Yeah, I mean, like especially like most like first time players or like people who are experiencing like their first player death like have like a really bad time with it.
Yeah.
Because like it's pretty tragic. It was like a thing that you spent like a lot of time on, and like a character you got like really attached to because like you were that character.
Especially if you have a good group dynamic too, because
like
if you're like if the
that's
healer dies, like that's a big problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Not only like the narrative stake too, like because if you have a group of very good role players, it will like feel like your friend died.
Yeah.
I do want to get more focused on video games though, so go ahead.
One of the things that I think is really interesting that the D20 system has allowed us to have is licensed tabletop RPGs for other RPGs. There's a Dragon Age tabletop, like pen and paper RPG, which is really weird. It doesn't work super well because there's only 3 classes in Dragon Age. So you can either be a mage or a rogue or a warrior in the game. But it's really funny that D&D is one of the influences on the game just because it's kind of a big influence on a lot of RPGs in general.
Yeah.
At least when it comes to like classes and like number systems and everything. And sometimes like the randomness is really influenced by D&D.
Speaking of Dragon Age, this ties like a lot into D&D's influence on video games because like rogues, like especially in the original Dragon Age, like the way the classes are structured are meant to like mirror Dungeons and Dragons. Like rogues are like really good and they have like a lot of skill ranks that they can do, so they can get really good at like picking locks and like talking to people, and they can be really good at like a lot of different sorts of things. And like, you know, mages have like big huge spells and all that sort of stuff. Because like Dragon Age is influenced off of classic CRPGs, which is a horrible name because it just stands for computer RPG.
Yeah, which
doesn't make any sense. That's
not wholly
RPG
accurate.
Ever.
Yeah,
but and the classic like idea of the computer RPG were all games that were directly licensed off of Dungeons and Dragons. Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Neverwinter Nights are all like CRPGs and used like the direct rules of Dungeons and Dragons as rules for their video games. And so you like in these games you would take control over parties of people, and as opposed to like, you know, being like a party of like 4 individual players and like there's like one DM running the game. You are all 4 of the players and the computer is like running the game, and so you're like pausing and taking all of their actions at the same time. Those games are really interesting.
Yeah, and even Baldur's Gate eventually kind of evolved into the Dark Alliance series too, which is
more of a hack and slash.
It's a little more Diablo, yeah.
Yeah.
But even then, it still uses the terminology. Like when you get a sword, it'll say the sword's power is like 2d8 plus something or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the first game that I really started to like, because I bought Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance for PS2 when I was like 12. So that was actually the first I'd seen that terminology up front. It's existed in the games that I had played. It just wasn't so upfront about it. So that was actually the point where I basically discovered what Dungeons and Dragons was from a perspective that wasn't just like, haha, look at nerds in movies or whatever. Because I'd seen that, but I didn't know what it was or anything. And I haven't played a whole lot of games that will use the terminology that way. I'll see games that will say, like, this sword does between 15 and 27 damage, which is functionally that same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But in general, yeah, D&D hasn't so much translated to video games so much as it's just a lot of its elements have permeated and inspired other games.
Yeah.
The one that I've mentioned on my writing on the website, and I think once on this podcast, was Black Onyx, the basically the first Japanese RPG. And I don't mean JRPG like the genre, I mean made in Japan, but it plays like a CRPG would. So it used the D&D rules, which then directly inspired Dragon Quest to be the foil to that, the more simplified console version. And you'll see a lot of D&D in the first Dragon Quest. You see your turn order isn't decided by like, it doesn't change each round. It's you literally roll for initiative based on your speed stats as soon as the battle begins. And you have like really simple spells that are like hurt and hurt more and heal more.
Yeah, yeah.
Which are actually the names of them, which I love. But yeah, you have the item torches that you can use to light up caves, and then you have the spell light to light up caves, which are all like factors that aren't really in a lot of JRPGs, but would have been in D&D. You would have to carry a torch, or you would have to have a spell.
Yeah. Speaking of like the really old examples, one of the classic like fundamental like dungeon crawling like roguelikes was just called D&D.
Yeah.
And that was like a super, super influential roguelike that like led through one of the major paths of roguelikes.
Roguelikes is probably the genre that's the closest to D&D, I think.
Yeah, they're really close to like a lot of the older roguelikes, like especially Rogue, are really similar to classic D&D, because you have like all sorts of like their naming conventions, and they play in sort of ways that are similar to how like first and second edition would play. Like they're dungeon crawling adventures where you like go down into a dungeon and like random numbers happen, and maybe you die, maybe you succeed, you get bigger numbers, and you get like cool equipment and spells and potions and stuff.
And I do think that roguelikes retain the like fun random nature of it. Like
Yeah.
when you're comparing roguelikes to just other video games, it's kind of easy to say like they're random so they're stupid, or like they're unfair because of that or whatever. But that is clearly supposed to be the like video game variant of D&D, and I think they capture that spirit well.
Yeah, like it's because like I mean I don't expect to win most of the time when I play any sort of roguelike, because most roguelikes are very hard.
Yeah.
And so you're supposed to just like play through and enjoy your time as this character, and then like you have a cool story of how you died, because like 8 hydras showed up.
Yeah.
Or like I accidentally like cast a spell and it reflected and I caught myself on fire and like fell down a pit and died.
Yeah, I remember listening to a podcast where they were talking about what was it? I think it was NetHack.
Yeah, I love NetHack.
Yeah, and he was like, the guy was saying that he was playing on his school's, what's it called? Not the DARPA net, but like the intranet, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, like his school's network. And he was like, yeah, I like a level 50 character, and I didn't play it for a little bit, so I came back. First thing I did was drink a potion that I didn't identify, and I died.
Yeah.
He lost his character that he'd had for months or whatever. So there is that, like, I think that tension is, it's not something I really look for in video games, but I think it's something that's very necessary for video games. I think it matters a lot that those types of games exist. I think it matters a lot that they're derived from basically the thing that invented RPGs. Because you basically have Tolkien created the modern interpretation of high fantasy, D&D gamified that, and then that evolved into our current interpretation with video games.
Yeah.
So there's a clear lineage with all of that. Like, we're still using elves, orcs, and dwarves. We still have our idea of dragons, or basically the Tolkien dragons.
Yeah.
Which is cool and also interesting because I haven't played any good Lord of the Rings games.
There's some pretty good ones. Oh, one fun fact. Tolkien's orcs aren't green. Those are Warhammer orcs that were the first green orcs.
Oh, yeah. Aren't his, like...
His are gray.
Poop-colored?
Oh, yeah. His are like, more like grayish and like ashy and stuff.
Aren't they also, like, evil elves or some shit?
They were like tortured elves. They were like bred to just like destroy them, pretty much.
Yeah. And isn't that also something that was in Elder Scrolls? Is the orcs are just like some god had like poop elves or something? That's what they are.
I don't know too much about the Elder Scrolls lore, so I can't answer that.
Good. I'm glad I'm saying that with no merit then.
Nice.
I have nothing to back that up.
It sounds about right from Todd Howard's masterpiece.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's D&D definitely helped influence just like the modern terrain that RPGs and just like fantasy too in general sits on, because you'll still read like, I mean, a lot of books are still Tolkien inspired when it comes to fantasy too, but there's like things that were introduced, like classes like rogues and stuff, and like if you read a book that's like some teen adventure fantasy novel, they're not going to call the person a rogue, but he's going
to be the archetype of a rogue.
But he's a rogue, like how you would play it in D&D.
And we still even refer to characters in video games that don't have classes identified with them. Like, Final Fantasy 15 obviously doesn't give your characters classes, but Gladio is obviously the, like, gladiator or warrior type.
Yeah, and isn't Ignis kind of the healer of the group?
Ignis is closer to a mage.
Yeah.
Because most of his, like, later skills are elemental. And then Prompto would be a rogue, and then Noctis is a warrior or something.
Then he's a boy.
Yeah, because there's always the 4-player party composition of like warrior, rogue, healer, mage. Yeah. Which is also like the 4 de facto classes in the first Final Fantasy. Although you can swap you can duplicate your classes, or you can also use the red mage, who's the combination of the cleric and wizard, or you can use the monk, who sucks.
Yeah.
I believe those are also the base classes in D&D 1.
Actually,
basic.
no. Rogue wasn't added for a really long time. You're totally right that fighter,
It was
cleric, and
thief,
mage were.
right?
Oh no. Well, I mean, like it was called thief when it was added, but it didn't.
Oh.
It wasn't added at all for like a while after the game came out. Like that concept just sort of didn't exist because in the original versions of D&D, the jobs of the rogue were supposed to be the jobs of like everybody. Everyone was supposed to be scouting for traps, and everyone was supposed to be disabling devices, and everyone was supposed to be sneaking, as opposed to just like having like one person doing it.
It's interesting because that does kind of make sense to me, but like the rogue archetype is so
strong.
It's everywhere. Like I don't think I've played an RPG that didn't have a rogue character in my whole life.
Yeah.
So
but yeah, first edition D&D like only had a couple base classes, and then you had to like to be a bard, you had to like be a level 5 fighter, and you had to get to another level in another class. Like it was weird multi-class building just to play a lute.
You give up the sword for the string instruments.
Yeah, like you had to like go through all this shit just to like pick up a flute.
Yeah, there were like weird prestige classes as opposed to just being base classes. Because I mean, like, what does that got to do with being a fighter, really?
Yeah,
I mean, bards do fight, and they're supposed to just be sort of like jacks of all trades. But
yeah, but like most people play bards as like horny boys.
Yeah. Fire Emblem's interpretation of a bard is wind god. Yeah, I've told you about Seti in Fire Emblem, right? The guy who was so broken that his speed
resets.
It hit the cap, reset to 0, and then still went high enough to beat everybody.
Yeah.
His class was bard.
Huh.
And as far as I know, there are only 2 bards that have ever existed, or no, 3 in Fire Emblem. One is the dancer archetype who like refreshes your turns and stuff, but 2 of them are wizards. So
yeah,
weird.
Which is that's interesting because like despite the fact that they're derived originally from warriors, that apparently everyone else also thought that was silly.
Yeah, well, because they're like they've always been partial like casters because you as a bard you're like partially a fighter because you're proficient with like I think they've always been proficient with some martial weapons, which is important for fighters. And then they've also always been able to like cast like spells through their magic
instruments, yeah.
And then they also have a lot of skills like rogues. So they're just sort of a little bit of everybody.
The Final Fantasy interpretation is just a support character. So he'll like cast regenerate on the whole party or protect or something on the whole party.
Fire Emblem I think is a really interesting thing that you brought up a little bit because in D&D there is you can do something called multi-classing, which is when you get to a level high enough in one class, you can pick up another, and then you can like if you get enough experience points kind of like swap between the two and stuff, but it lets you get traits from multiple classes to like really customize your character build. And in Fire Emblem, when you promote with the seal, a lot of the times it almost is like a multi-classing character.
In Awakening?
Yeah, in Awakening at least. And then in
that's not in any of the others, I don't think. Fates.
But it's really interesting that's especially since it's only apparently in those that's something that was brought in so late to the game. Because
skills are only in a few Fire Emblem games to be able to do something like that, and multi-classing is only in 2 games, I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
well, it's when you promote your character to a different like rank or class.
Oh, you're talking about prestiging? Yeah. Okay, that is in almost every Fire Emblem. Yeah, I thought you were talking about the skills that you gain with the classes.
That's almost like multi-classing because then you're like a general, so you can use swords, but you also gain the ability to use axes or whatever.
Yeah, and you'll typically gain some kind of skill or some kind of new weapon trait or like something like that in each game.
Yeah. I would argue that it's more like prestige classes than D&D.
Okay.
Because like
Because multi-classing is literally what you do in Awakening when you swap to a different class and then derive the skills from both of them.
Yeah, which is some trickery.
Yeah. I mean, hey, that's why it's good.
Yeah.
Because with like in D&D multi-classing, you can still only get 20 levels. So you don't get, if you multi-class at all, you don't get to get whatever like the final bonus for your classes. But you do get to get whatever like the class features are for like both those classes, and you get to get the features of like whatever level you get to in both of those classes, or however many you choose.
Appropriately, there's a lot of this that's used in the modern versions of Dragon Quest. For example, a lot of them have the minstrel class bard, and your primary weapon is like a sword, but you can also use like a wide variety of like damaging and healing magic. You also have a lot of the like what would be the like human trait abilities in D&D, like just having a wide variety of skills like passives and stuff like lockpicking and inspecting and stuff like that. So they are the jack of all trades class, but they're also like, if you were to add up all of their stats, they're more powerful than the other specialized classes, but that still doesn't translate to them being stronger.
Yeah, because they're not as good at any of those like particular jobs.
Yeah, that makes them sufficient at whatever the hole in your party is.
Yeah.
Or it lets you double up if you like really need one particular type of character for a boss or something like that. And also, I think it was Dragon Quest III that made it so when you promote, what was it? It wasn't called Minstrel in that game, but they had a similar, like, almost joke class who could promote into Sage, which was the most powerful class. So, Dragon Quest also has reclassing, too, and prestige classes.
That's
like,
cool.
if you get to a certain rank with, like, Warrior, you can become a Paladin.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get to, like, level 99, and you keep getting skill points to distribute between all these ranks of other stats you can have, and then you can revert to level 1, and then do it all again. In order to get every single skill for one character in Dragon Quest IX, you have to get to level 1700. Endgame level is 28.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Dragon Quest games are, like, unashamedly grindfest.
Yeah.
But that's also kind of what Japanese gaming culture prefers out of Dragon Quest. It's very traditionalist.
Yeah, that's also like pretty reflective too of first and second edition D&D, because the rules just didn't allow for a ton of room for role playing in regards to like building a character and like having interactions and things like that. You could always do it, but it was a lot more focused on combat and things that happened inside of combat and making yourself stronger and just getting better numbers instead of like the more analytical, like wiggling your way out of combat sort of things, or role playing in a town, which is what I really, really, really enjoy from D&D is the aspects where it's like, oh yeah, I have a 17 in acrobatics, so I'm gonna climb this wall and like try to pull the dude over the edge instead of something else. Yeah,
that's something that I think that the main point I'm making is that video games, each series that is clearly inspired by D&D has taken like one or two elements and ran with them, but don't quite either understand or are capable of implementing everything. So, for example, you do have like acrobatic skills and stuff in Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Yeah.
But you can't ever use that to like snag a dude off a cliff or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because like D&D is essentially in the sense of a video game. It's kind of like an RPG would have to be procedurally generated, including the story, in order for it to ever match what D&D offers. Yeah, which is why it's so strong.
Currently, there just isn't really a great way to make a D&D exact game. The closest we can get is stuff like the Romancing Saga series or like Saga Frontier, which just have a billion checks for like if-then statements and stuff.
Yeah.
So like there are hundreds of ways the story can progress, and hundreds of characters and types of characters and ways you can develop your character and whatnot. And you do actually, so you pick a main character at the start of Romancing Saga, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of like 12 characters or something. Your party will consist of the other characters you've played as that you recruit in the towns you left them in.
That's cool.
So that's a little bit D&D. That's about as close as you can get with a single player experience at the moment.
Yeah. There's not as much, like, you just can't really do that much procedural generation. Like, it's hard to program collaborative storytelling.
Yeah, like it would have to be, because that's one of the really awesome things about D&D is that you can have like kind of an idea of like an overarching plot, as most campaigns do, but how you get there can vary wildly depending on who you play it with. You could play the same campaign, have the same notes for two different groups of people and end up...
And they won't be anything alike
No.
after the first hour.
Absolutely not. Just because it does...
It really depends on, like, because the main characters are the players.
Yeah, it depends on who you play with, but then there's also that...
Well, also, if you have, like, the same campaign played by the same players, it won't be the same because of dice rolls and stuff.
Yeah. But then that way, too, with the fact that there are no super finite rules, you can kind of just do whatever. Like, there are going to be things you, like, have to do, I guess. Like, you're going to... Like, there's always going to be rolls you need to make or that sort of thing. But with D&D, the idea that, like, if I just get a nat 20, I could, like, swing off the chandelier and land on top of the boss's head and, like, just stab him in the eye and get it over with in, like, the first round is, like, absolutely awesome. And that's not something that, like, RPGs can really offer, especially because they're kind of programmed to go in very specific ways, computer RPGs, and that sort of thing, which is why I think D&D's gotten so strong. But it's also really funny, too, when you look at... 3rd, 4th, and then 5th. 3rd edition was really awesome for combining advanced and basic into one unified thing, and that's when the D20 system was like actually finite and everything, and that's a lot of the rules for D20 are then what led to like the Star Wars game or the Star Wars tabletop RPG being made.
Yeah.
Just because it offered a huge standardization.
Because pretty much any D20 system uses the same D20 system that 3rd edition uses.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can really easily put that into basically any game environment. Like, you sent me that document for the Fire Emblem one. I'm positive there's a Final Fantasy one. There's got to be a Game of Thrones one.
Oh,
yeah. There's
an official Game of Thrones one.
Yeah.
There's a couple Zelda ones that are all unofficial. But the system lets people do so much with it, and 3.5 especially, because it's under the open game license, lets you do whatever, and that's why Pathfinder still is operating, because it is just technically a continuation of 3.5. But it's really interesting seeing it go from this like huge move towards being freeform and being like standardized across rule sets to 4, which...
Video games.
Yeah, which was... D&D was influenced video games, but video games are what influenced 4.
Which
because
is
it wasn't
kind of bad, actually, because I feel like video games never quite got the point of D&D.
Which is why 4 is so combat heavy.
Yeah, because the only things that easily translate into video games are the numbers and the combat.
There's a lot of cool ideas in 4, but I'll let you go ahead, because I cut you off on accident.
So I think Now I forgot. Thanks, Dan.
Oh, dang.
We're talking about numbers, moving over and everything.
Yeah, so that's why I think the... Because when we're talking about these kind of things, when we were comparing medias and stuff like that, I always like to think about, like, which one has the most powerful, like, end game? Like, the best version of D&D that will ever exist in human history, how is that going to compare to the best interpretation of a video game version of D&D that could possibly be made in human history? And I think it's really interesting that D&D might actually be superior.
Yeah.
Because when you compare, like... The best version of D&D that could ever exist could be made right now. It just depends on like how good you are at storytelling, how like balanced you can make the game and whatnot, how good your players are. Whereas we are decades of computational power away from making that in a video game.
Yeah.
So just like what you need to make the perfect D&D game is like some dice and some dudes. Yeah. But what you need for a video game is like an absurd amount of processing power, time, code, money, people, and whatnot.
Yeah.
And even then, that's only to compare. That doesn't even make it better.
And part of the thing with D&D is that it is all imagination based. Yeah. You don't have to have all the processing power to render graphics if you don't have graphics.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so persuasive, and I think another reason why D&D podcasts are getting really, really big is because it's essentially harkening back to the early days of radio with like radio dramas, but because the people who are playing the game don't see anything either, you don't need to see anything because they're thinking they have a picture of how it's playing out in their heads, and so do you, but yours isn't any less valid than theirs because there's nothing to compare it to.
Yeah. The biggest issue, or the easiest way to draw an analog to this issue is the fact that no matter what in a video game, there will always be something that you're not able to do that you think would be really cool if you could.
Yeah.
Whereas D&D has never and will never have that issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as long as you get the right rolls for it, you're set.
If you're playing a D&D inspired video game and you can't jump off the chandelier to kill the boss in one hit with a critical, then it will never match D&D.
Yeah.
Until every single potential option is available in the game, it just will not be the same thing. Yeah. And I don't think that's inherently bad, because I do prefer video games to D&D, but I also like the fact that video games are never going to outclass D&D enough to make it irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they offer just, like, different things.
Yeah. I like that they can coexist and they can bounce off of each other.
Yeah.
And even though it's kind of fun to compare, like, which one's better, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, because it's just apples and oranges.
Yeah, but it's the kind of thing where, like, people were worried that video games were going to overtake books, or TV was going to overtake books, and then video games would wipe out movies and all that stuff, and, like, TV killed a radio star and whatnot. But we're starting to see that, like, for D&D and video games, I don't think there's any reason they can't coexist, and I don't think I think it's going to be, like, it's going to take nuclear war to make them stop coexisting, basically.
Yeah, for as long as there's going to be somebody who's dissatisfied with the way that a game went at some point, it could just be even the tiniest thing, like the NPCs didn't have different dialogue or whatever.
Yeah, somebody will be there to write that story in D&D instead.
Yeah.
Okay, so point of this podcast is video games suck.
Yeah, video games are garbage. We're making a D&D podcast now, and all I'm going to do is talk about
Dan is on the fly teaching you how to use Audacity.
It's the yellow stop button.
Okay.
It's the stop button.
Well, I didn't know if I had to, like, whatever.
Yeah, so we're, Respawn Launch is over forever.
I really wish I just pressed it then.
What do you mean, this one?
Respawn Launch is over forever. We're turning into a D&D podcast. Get ready for the beginning of our campaign next week.
Easy.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening.
No. Okay. So.
Yeah, we're not actually doing that.
That is the end of this episode, though. I think, unless anyone else has something to say.
No.
Yeah, I'm good.
I love D&D.
Okay. All right. Let me catch my breath. Check us out on respawnlaunchofficial.wordpress.com to see weekly writings every Tuesday. This is uploaded to YouTube, which is the only place you can possibly be listening to this, unless you're Mark, who's in the other room. What else do we have? Follow us on Twitter, respawn_lounge. Check us out on Facebook, where I've posted, like, 2 questions in the past 3 months.
Nobody ever answers, so we just feel sad.
I put my Fire Emblem Heroes friend ID on, and nobody added me, so I uninstalled the game. What else do we have?
Music.
Oh, yeah, music by my friend Parker, Tafka, TAFKAA__. It's in the description, so I'm told.
It is.
Yeah, Dan's the man.
I don't know, our personal Twitters, maybe? I'm at Handshake Guy if you want to see me ramble about JRPGs.
I'm at Riva Pinata. It's like Viva Pinata, but my name.
And also misspelled as Pinata, because you didn't have the mark over the end.
I'm sorry that Twitter won't let me put the little mark over the end, but you can also find me on pretty much everywhere as Riva Pinata. I'm really hard to find on Steam for some reason. Like, I'm just impossible to find. So if you can find, like, we have a Respawn Launch Steam group that we never talk about.
Do we?
Yeah, but I'm the administrator for that.
I didn't know that.
I forgot.
Yeah, well, because we were gonna...
Why wasn't I invited?
You're part of the Steam group.
I am?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's listed as my primary group on Steam.
It is?
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
We have the Steam group because when we were going to be streaming or having that streaming schedule, we were going to stream some games that, like, people could hop in on.
No, we never did.
And then Casey moved and everything.
Well, there it is. I had no idea.
Yeah, I think we have 7 members so far.
Yeah.
Because I literally always forget to talk about it. But yeah, I'm the administrator for the group, so you can go there and also, like, add me on Steam from there.
It's literally just our friends that we've seen today.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is that?
Oh, that's Jordan.
Oh.
The unkillable.
Yeah, but if you have trouble finding me on Steam, which I'm always open to like friend requests there, because like my 4 friends are the people who are like sitting in the room and Mark. Yeah, and then Dan is not an axe.
Is underscore not underscore and underscore axe.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter if you want. I don't actually post anything.
Yeah, all
No,
you have
you-
is have a stupid icon that's
You're-
a
you're,
melting chocolate dog.
Your
It's like a
your
weird
Twitter use has been
Italian
liking.
bulldog.
Your Twitter use has been liking 5 of my posts in the past 5 years.
Yeah,
Like my alarm go off.
yeah. The
This is a disaster.
what I use Twitter for is tagging Casey and things or harassing Casey,
Yeah,
pretty much. So anyway, I think that's about it.
yeah, that's everything I think.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for listening and have a good day or
Thanks for listening.
night or whatever. All right, goodbye.